meant to be this morning a very informal discussion. And I think one of the things to really keep in mind is there is no perfect answer for any family of how to make a clearing for God and for your children. There's no perfect answer, and it's all unique to everybody's families. But I have to say today, I was so moved by Ann's sermon. If you weren't in church, I encourage you to listen to it. Because if you're like me, my deepest hope for my children, no matter they're 0, our oldest is 28, is for them to know that God has called them by name and that they belong to God. And that when they walk through the fire, they won't be burned. And that they won't be overwhelmed, and that God calls them by name. I mean, there are just so many of those wonderful foundational concepts. And I've always said to my kids that I want their primary identity to be that they are children of God, right? And it's so hard on this day for all of us as we manage complex and busy lives, and our kids have so many different identities. I think more and more in terms of everything that's asked of our families. So I love that their primary identity is that they're children of God. So I wanted to just open quickly with a prayer, and then we'll get started. Let us pray. Loving God, you have blessed us with the joy and care of children. Give us calm strength and patient wisdom as we bring them up, that we may teach them to love whatever is just and true and good, following the example of Jesus. Give us insight as we navigate ways where we make a clearing for you in the midst of complex and busy lives. Be present in our discussion here today that we might support each other in this awesome task of raising our children to know you and love you. Amen. And now I just want to introduce Maggie Grove. For those of you who haven't met, this is Dr. Maggie Grove. We're so fortunate to have Maggie moderate this discussion today. Maggie brings a unique perspective to our discussion as a professional educator and current principal of Wolf Trap Elementary School for the past 4 years. 4 years. She spent her professional career nurturing children and families and creating school communities where children can thrive. Moreover, she and her husband David, who's present, have made Holy Comforter their spiritual home for the last 17 years. And I know that Maggie has a deep and abiding faith, which she brings to all that she does. And so we're so fortunate to have you.
I always like a round of applause. So I am going to jump right in because the other night was on a planning call with this group, and this is such an amazing group of parents that has just such wisdom to share. And so we are going to try and hop through. We do have some questions that we wanted just to pose to the panel and then have you guys respond to as you feel moved to do. But we're going to go ahead and just start with intros. So I'm going to start. Rita's got the mic down there at the end, and we are supposed to use the mics because we are recording this lovely panel today. So we're going to try and remember that because I'm loud anyway, so I try to not use the mic, but I'll try to keep on it. So we're going to have our panelists just do names and ages of your kiddos. And I believe we had also said years that you've been at Holy Comforter, and maybe just a quick couple of things your kiddos have done here at Holy Comforter that you have found impactful. So name, years at Holy Comforter, kids, maybe an impactful activity. And Rita, we'll start with you. You have the mic.
Is that working? Okay.
Yes.
I'm Rita Galliano, and I have a 17-year-old Graham Miller and a 26-year-old daughter, Sasha Reynolds. And we started coming here when she was about 2 years old. Just by walking in, it felt and looked and seemed a lot like my church I grew up going to in Arlington. A little wider, not quite as long. Sasha went through like Sunday school here, and she really enjoyed acolyting because it was kind of got her out of sitting in the pew with mom the whole time. Graham loved acolyting as well, and Graham went to preschool here, and sort of he's just been in this space for his whole time. So I guess it's been 24 years. Sasha's 26, and it's, you know, we'll talk more about how great that's been for our family. So kind of a nice anchor. So
Thanks.
Morning. I'm Nicole Sievers. We've been coming to the church, can you all hear me? Yeah. For about, 2 years only. We have a 21-year-old son who's in college, an 18-year-old son who's in college, and our 15-year-old daughter who's a sophomore in high school, and she's really tied in. She does youth group, mission trips, acolyting, reading. If there's anything, confirmation class, facets, that girl is into it. So that's our story.
Thanks. Did I say my name?
Yes.
Yes.
I will tell you. I will come back to you.
I'm Josh Fix. This is my wife, Amberly. We have a 4.5-year-old Theo, and we've been coming here and been in the area for the last 2.5 years. I'll let Amberly tell you a little bit more about Theo's activities.
I'm Amberly. Theodore does the children's chapel during service, but he also does the preschool kindergarten class for Sunday school, and we've come to some of the kind of outside activities like the Easter things. Great, thanks.
Hi, my name's Katie Flaw. My 2 kiddos are Kennedy and Connor Flaw, a 5-year-old boy and a 7-year-old girl, so kindergarten, 2nd grade. We are a military family, so we've been here in the area for 5 years and here at the church probably for, I think, coming up on 3. We've started the kids in Sunday school, which they really, really loved. And we like to come to Saturday night chapel or Saturday night service. They love doing any of the extra pumpkin carving, Easter egg hunting, any of those kind of things.
Awesome, great.
Thanks. Welcome to you guys, and thank you so much for being here. I know we really appreciate all of your insights. Katie, I'm going to pass over to Nicole, if I can. Nicole, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to try and go not in line, which, keeps us spicy here in the end. So, Nicole, we had talked a little bit the other night about some of the questions we wanted to just bring forward, some of the things that people might want to hear about. And one of the things that you had said you might talk a little bit about are other family traditions that you do to keep faith at the forefront in your family. And we had talked about maybe a Holy Comforter event or something other than church maybe that helps you stay connected to your faith, or even something with the kiddos that has really brought that forward for them at Holy Comforter. So will you kick us off and tell us a little bit about how you guys do that in your family?
Yes. So it's funny that she's not here. She's going to come. You guys heard me say that Caroline is tied into all these things. And what I said the other night when we were all planning is that everyone in my family kind of just goes along with what I say. And it's not because I'm this tremendous leader. I think it's a lot more like, just do it, because otherwise she's just going to argue with us and talk us into it. And so we came to the church a few years ago, and then Caroline, I have to say, really became our leader. I mean, something happened where she got here and something happened where she just plugged in. And I think for her what that was the doing, the rolling up of the sleeves. So the being able to go to Puerto Rico on the mission trip, to participate in facets, to learn about her faith with the youth group with Dennis, who's just tremendous, her connection with our clergy. She's really been our leader on some levels. I'll show up and I'll do the things and but Caroline really, to be able to roll her sleeves up and get in there, she's the one who has sort of brought us forward. And so then we're sort of inspired to, okay, what else can we do? Can we do facets? Can I do Pennywise one Sunday, which kind of scares me to death? So you sort of have to find the things, right, that you get into. So as a result of that, the boys kind of struggled because they're older, and we had gone to another church before COVID. And then I was thinking about this last night. I think what happened is there was too much change. There was COVID, and then the boys left for college, and then I'm like, oh, surprise, we go to a different church now. And so there was a little bit of resentment, and I had to learn to just be patient with that. And then just this holiday season, it clicked. And I saw the boys, I think because they saw their sister narrating at Christmas Eve and acolyting, they were sort of like, huh, and they opened their hearts a little, and there was a little bit of an exhale. So for the Sievers family, it's really been about what can we do, because the just sitting and watching or having mom say, believe in God, isn't enough. So that's what's mattered in our family.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. I would also just maybe have you pass it down to Katie, because just on that same kind of vein, we were talking about challenges about just being new to a community, and I think I'm going to get the Fixes to kind of chime in on this too, but being new to a community, being part of a family, a military family that's come in, what are some of those challenges that you're seeing maybe plugging into some of those activities, right? Like, do you see some of that happening as you get there, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, it was interesting. One of the questions I was going to have is just like, as advice for like younger parents and family, of like, how do you continue to incorporate that and make sure that, like what Beth was saying, is like the presence of God is really important for our kids as like a foundation. For us as a, I mean, not to get into like couples and everything else, but it's like then figuring out a blend of Chris and I, my husband, we both grew up Catholic, and then where do we land? Like, where is our church family going to be? You know, it's like, where do we all fill like that cup of, you know, what our needs are from the actual church home? So this was a super great blend for us, where like coming up with Catholicism and it's like, not really loving that. You know, contemporary things like as our travels around and like, you know, church shopping, basically I called it for church shopping for a couple years. And then we landed here, it's like a great blend of where the children's ministry was a huge thing for me, for us. And when the kids really loved it, it was funny because like, it's kind of like they're our little leaders, and then when we follow suit, then it's like, all right, mom's in line, and then dad's in line. And so it's just been a really cool, you know, community that we continue to kind of grow and lean into here.
Awesome. Do you feel like there are times on Sundays, perhaps, or maybe some of those activities on other days that you have some of those challenges getting the kiddos here?
100%.
And how do you resolve that in your family?
Well, we're not doing a great job, I don't think, at all.
Love your honesty.
And I was saying before too, as a military family, and I can only say testament, I was like, I've only been a mom for 7 years, so as a second grader, I'm new to figuring out like, how do you navigate sports and the sports in 2025 now that are wild and intense, and it's like not just you're not doing one thing, you're doing private lessons and you're doing this, and it's a really intense area, and that's where I was curious of, I call home because home is Ohio for me. And so I'll talk to my sister, and she's got 4 girls spanning from 16 to 6, and like, is it the same crazy there as it is here? Because I keep saying it's crazy here, and I'm like, I don't know if it's really here. I think is it just being a parent in this generation? So I think there's a unique intensity where we have, that's very unique to this Northern Virginia culture. And for us is where we have to really prioritize that. It's kind of like that whole let them theory that's like circulating in this whole, you know, whole culture, is that what maybe some are doing is not what's good for us. And so then really prioritizing, all right, how do we, our little guy, he's 5. It's like he really loves and wants to figure out how to play hockey. Well, hockey is on Sunday mornings. And so we don't go to service on Sunday mornings, but we will make it to Sunday school for sure. So we have that kind of, I guess, a balance. I still don't love it because I'm like, what about the Sabbath? Why don't we just have a family day? And so that's a whole thing too. So then we try to figure out like, all right, can we make it to a Saturday night, or do we listen online? I do a ton of just listening to like Christian music, and so I think in a lot of ways, like, you know, you'll hear like on the message on, you know, XM radio, like other little testimonies or like little bits and pieces of things. So I think they do pick up on a ton more than, I mean, what I certainly give them credit for.
Yeah.
So it's not, it's messy, to be honest. Like, it's really messy, and we're still trying to figure it all out.
Yeah.
When you
yeah.
get it figured out, let me know.
That's right. Amberly and Josh, I think the other night when we were talking, this just dovetails kind of very nicely into that, because I know you guys came from another community as well, and came up to Northern Virginia. And so we were talking, and I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about the challenges maybe of this area, maybe related to other areas, and to getting into church, and then what are some of the things that you incorporate at home? I know that when we spoke the other night, you talked about the liturgical pieces and the things that you really want to have present in your home. Can you talk a little bit about that, and being up here, maybe in Northern Virginia versus South Texas, you know, and kind of how those things have looked different maybe, and how we plugged Holy Comforter into getting, you know, some of the activities here as well.
So to be fair, when we were in Texas, it was still very much COVID.
Right. Yeah.
So to say that like I have a good grasp on like how Northern Virginia is just totally different, I can't honestly say that I fully understand, because I felt like very isolated in Texas for the most part. So when, and really in like Charlottesville, we were in Charlottesville because it started there. So we were in Charlottesville for a year, and then Theodore was born in May of 2020, so like at the height of it all. And then we moved like 4 or 6 weeks later to Texas, still very much isolated. And then moved back here to Northern Virginia 2022. Yeah, 2022. So we've been here for about 2.5 years. And one thing that I'll say is I grew up in Texas, but I'm also of a different generation now. So I don't know, I still feel like in Texas, sports culture is like insane. So like you're in it. But ours was too young for all of that. What I'll say about, liturgical pieces of it, obviously like before COVID, we were going to church pretty regularly, but then COVID hit and we couldn't, and we had a newborn, and so we definitely weren't. We probably waited longer than I would say most people maybe even. But we also have a kid who gets sick very easily. So I did a lot of stuff at home trying to still bring in that sort of rhythm, that liturgical rhythm. So we do a lot of Advent activities. I do a lot of pointing out of like special days and talking a lot about like in this last year, I think this is the first year that Theodore really got it, where we read a lot of the Jesse Tree stories every morning before school during Advent, leading up to Christmas, and he really got into that. So we do a lot of those kinds of things.
Yeah, and on that, it's not just for the Advent season and then Christmas, but we try to work this in throughout the year, and it really did start because when we were in Texas, there were no in-person church services at first. And then about a year to a year and a half in, we knew that we would be moving again in a half a year to a year, and so we were kind of hesitant to start participating in church community, only to move a few months later. And so we really sort of plugged back into church life when we returned to the Northern Virginia area. This is our second time in the Northern Virginia area. So we started coming here essentially when we moved, and that was in 2022 after things had settled down a little bit. So in the meantime, what we have done is sort of set up ways to incorporate the liturgical seasons, the liturgical year, and the appropriate stories for that into sort of our general pattern of life. And that certainly isn't the only thing that we were doing. There's, I'd say for every sort of like church-themed book, children's book in the house, there's probably 2 Bluey books and 3 or 4 others, sort of miscellaneous. But it is something that we tried to incorporate in so he is familiar with.
That's great. We were talking about younger kids, and Rita, you had said the other evening that we were going to talk a little bit about, because you have older kiddos, and I think it'll be interesting maybe to hear a little bit of your piece, if you can work it in there, a little about how to incorporate all the things that go on, maybe outside activities and those kinds of things in relation to Holy Comforter, but also, if you wouldn't mind starting, about talking a little bit about the positive impacts that you feel like on your older kiddos, right? That keeping that connection to church has had, and how you've seen that reflected in a positive way. And then we might circle back around a little bit and talk about like how to keep that connected all the way up through elementary school and high school, right? So if you'd start there, that'd be great.
Let's try to do that. So I know that, I guess, an example of what is going now, and my son is now 17, he'll go off to college in the fall, and we were all at Shrinemont in the fall, a few months ago, and he's, there comes a point where, you're starting into the Sunday service, and during that last, couple of hours at Shrinemont, they'll put a question out and ask everybody, what was your favorite thing? What did you love about, what did you learn, what did you love, what's your experience this weekend? And he stood up, he had met Gabe, whose dad is here, and Gabe does like a cool, like kind of podcast, I'm gonna say it wrong, Instagram video or podcast or something. And Graham was like, I met Gabe, I saw some of what he posts every day, and it's kind of his reflections on his faith. And I'm really inspired by it, and I'm really glad that I met him. And I was like listening to him thinking, you didn't say a word about any of that to me the whole weekend. It was more of his experience as a teenager, meeting another teenager who was, younger, but probably a little more advanced in the way he was thinking about his faith. And so it was very inspiring. And I thought, that's not what my son would have talked about in front of other people maybe a few years ago. Definitely wasn't at that point where he was comfortable, I think. So now, you know, I think with my daughter and my son, you know, I wanted my daughter to do confirm, not conform, but it didn't work with her dance practice on Mondays. So she met with the clergy a few times to learn some of that. We had to just come up with an alternative. My son, he was able to do confirm, not conform. And then he was too squirrely with me at church. And there's so much going on in the pew that when I found out that Haley was doing acolyting in 6th grade, I'm like, can Graham do acolyting in 6th grade? So I think each step of the way, I mean, he came to preschool here and she didn't. She had experiences here that he didn't have. So I feel like we're always trying, and you can project a season or two ahead and think you're going to do something great with your child with some kind of learning or faith, and then you just have to pivot often because it might be sports or it might be their interest. There's just things that change for the better and for the worse. So I don't even remember a conversation about the mission trip. Like, should we? Graham just said, I'm planning to go in June. That's going to work, right? And I'm like, yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, that probably will work. And it was just him telling me this is what we're doing because we've all been doing this other stuff all year, and then we're going in June. And he had a great time on the mission trip. So I feel like when you think about your younger kids, what are the things they can do? And some will work and some won't. And they'll also be like, I really think some of these kids end up sort of driving or leading and showing us so much as they lean in. It's been really cool to see that. So
I heard you, I want to pick up on something I heard you say that about if confirm, not conform didn't work, that there might be opportunities in the church where you might approach the clergy or say, hey, is there a different way we might be able to approach this that makes it work for my kiddo? And you felt like that worked. And that's something that can happen with the clergy. So that's just something,
Right.
you know, we have to think outside the box because sometimes schedules, I guess, don't always work
Right.
the way we would like for them to work because kids have a lot of things that they want to do.
Right,
Right.
right. And just, and not just the clergy, you know, talking to Dennis and talking to Sunday school teachers and saying, you know, and for me, you know, my son is only with me every other weekend. So asking if he can be an acolyte whenever he's here as opposed to on the schedule of acolyting. And it's like, absolutely, you know, when he can be here, let us know when he's not, but when he can be here, we'll work with it. So for us, this every other weekend thing is now just kind of not important because his dad is like, he really enjoys it. If he wants to go, he can go. You know?
I'm going to put something out to the group, and I'm just curious about if you have any rules, quote, air quote, rules about going to church or, you know, something attendance to church. Katie, you mentioned the service itself doesn't always work out, right, the way that you would like for it to work out. Is there then like a, hey, we're not going to maybe be at church, but you're going to plan to do something else along the way? Can you guys speak to that a little bit? Are there rules about that in your house? And if so, how does that look, or what does that look like?
I think that's like ever evolving for us. I think it's the Sunday school is pretty like our hard set, like they're for sure here, which then give, whether it's, you know, Chris or I, like we get some time to, I mean, sometimes like I'll just dive in, like, you know, pick up, one of my 2025 goals is to figure out how to read the Bible. Not, I guess cover to cover is not really the way to do it, but anyway, that's like a whole thing. So, you know, I have an hour to kind of, you know, do my own kind of thing. So we haven't figured out the hard set, and then if we're not attending the service, when is the time that we can either watch it or listen or something? But Sunday school is kind of like our, you know, that is our hour. So they have their time to learn and, you know, whatever. They grasp actually a lot. They teach us a lot. And then we have our hour that where we can, you know, either come together as a couple or individually and kind of, you know, just supplement something. So it's evolving.
I will say that I find that being able to watch a recorded service, which I think you guys were talking about COVID a little bit, which I think has sort of reset how we think about, right? Like, it is nice, I'm originally from Arkansas, I can watch the service of the church I grew up in periodically, which I think is sort of a nice thing to be able to do, right? So it's kind of level, it's reset, I think, sort of how we may engage, right? If you can sit with your family and do that kind of thing. Amberly, what about you guys? Do you have rules around like what we're gonna be at or how we're gonna make that work or what that looks like?
Rules? I mean, not really. No. I don't know. I really, with him being 4.5, I don't know how we will approach that as he gets older. I can't really say I have a lot of experience with that because even growing up, church was, you just did that. Like,
Yeah.
it wasn't, there was not a question. It's like, Like, I think it would have been more weird for me to be like, I don't want to go. Like, that just wasn't a thing.
Right.
And I, like, maybe because I wasn't rebellious, I don't know,
Right,
but like
right.
in that way.
No, I connect with that.
Yeah,
that
it just wasn't a
we just
thing.
went, that was how you did it, yeah.
So yeah, like and I was really plugged in as a kid,
Yeah.
so it
Yeah.
like it would have been devastating to me in a lot of ways not to go, like if something weird happened. So I don't know how. Like I know that there's certainly situations where kids are like, I don't want to go, I'm not going, and like cry all the things, right? But I don't know how I would handle that exactly. It just hasn't been a thing.
Yeah. Maybe it won't be.
I mean, fortunately for us, it has not been an issue yet. Theodore is only 4.5, and he tends to be fairly compliant in terms of that sort of thing. And he wants to be in the places that we're going and do the things that we're doing. So I guess in terms of rules, though, one of the things for him is rules when you're actually in church, and using an appropriately quiet voice, and maintaining like some sort of reasonable like accommodations for the people around you and that sort of thing. And because he actually does want to be in the place that mommy and daddy are and do the things that we're doing, when we tell him, hey, you have to do these things if you want to be here, he does the things because he does want to be here. So I guess that's kind of a problem to have for us in terms of like rules to make sure that he follows in terms of other behaviors that are sort of church related. It's more sort of like how he relates to other people in the world in general and modeling the behavior that reflects his identity as a body of Christ.
Yeah, excellent, great. Nicole, do you guys have, it's interesting with the older kids, right? Because I think once they're kind of plugged in, it probably draws back a little bit on that, like, wow, we have to be there. And I guess when driving starts, they kind of do their thing and come along the way. Do you guys feel like they're engaged enough that they're here? Are there times that there ebbs and flows, or pretty much still coming to church?
There were definitely ebbs and flows. I have a couple kids that are not compliant. And so at our old church, they would come along, I would make them come when I was a Sunday school teacher, but as I have said many times, there was no one behaving less like a Christian than Nicole Sievers on Sunday mornings when I was doing Sunday school. I was like, I have to quit because I'm screaming at my children and then showing up saying, let's all be like Jesus, even though I just totally threatened my children in the parking lot. And so I will say this, peer pressure gets a bad rap in our culture, but something towards what Rita was saying, I have learned finally after 21 years, and I'm still learning, peer pressure kind of helps me with my kids. Because when my older boy sees people working to get internships, he kind of clicks in. And that's part of what happened here. Caroline sort of walked in and saw a couple friends and was sort of like, well, I want to hang out with them. And then it's sort of that peer pressure. It's sort of like, well, we're going to Puerto Rico, like, because that's what we're doing. So, I would encourage you to try to figure out what works with your child, but also, like, let their friends kind of kick in a little bit, too. Yeah.
We don't have big set of rules, but I have to just, like, even recently, Graham was like, well, I'm going to lunch today, so I'm not going to church in the morning. I go, what? And he goes, well, I have to be there at 11. I said, why don't you tell him 11:15 and go to church? You can leave a little early. And so it's like we negotiate, right? Because sometimes he's just, but a lot of the time, he doesn't want to drive with me though. You know what I mean? Like because he's afraid he's gonna have to hang out here a really long time. You know what I mean? It's like we're constantly compromising to try to.
And part of that too is like learning life, right? Like sometimes we all as adults say, oh, I'm meeting someone for lunch. Oh, okay, well then I'll go for a short amount, right? It's kind of like making sure that you're making those things that are positive for you also. Mm-hmm. We're gonna round it out because I think we also want to give a couple minutes if we have any people who want to give me any good wisdom from the group also. But here's our final question, and we're gonna just kind of pass back down the road. So just knowing that church attendance can be countercultural, in our community and in our lives sometimes. And we have Sundays and a lot of activities going on from day to day. I guess what I would love for you guys to share is, what is your why for prioritizing church in your family? What do you feel why is it a cornerstone for what you do? And just tell us why that is important with your family. You can start, yes, Rita.
I think for me, it was really important to my mom that we go to church with her when I was growing up, and then she got sick. So when she got sick and had to go into a care facility, I didn't have any church. I was with my dad and his new wife, and so I went to St. Matthew's with a family my friend, for 7th and 8th grade. And like, I just floated for a while trying to figure out if I could have that back in my life. So as a mother, it isn't something that I think it's like really important, because it reflects something my mom taught me. And even when she was in a care facility, reading the large print Bible was really something she wanted to do each time I was with her. You know, I saw her often, and reading the large print Bible was her, like, just one of the gifts that we could do together. So for my kids, they know that, and they know it's really important, and I'm a single mom, and it's given us some stability to be around a community of people that are trusted, and I love the role models that come through this. So it's been important for, especially my son. I think it's been really great for him to see, you know, male and female role models. And I will say that, like, we joked about what would Father Rick do. That was like our WWFRD. What would Father Rick do? That was like years ago. And then I said to him, so what will you say now? I mean, now we have these two new people. And he goes like, WWMAD. And I was like, oh, I thought he was gonna say John. It was what would Mother Ann do? What would Mother Ann do? WWMAD. I was like, that's so cool, you know? So like in those moments, you know, like part of decision making, these great role models. So yeah.
That's great. Yeah, it's great. Thanks, Rita. Nicole. Yeah, it's a little bit similar. I think, you know, what I've learned in my half century, and I'm continuing to learn, is that life is hard, and you go through hard things, and you realize mom and dad can't fix everything. And that goes both ways. Learning that I can't fix everything for my kids, and that, you know, little kids, little problems, big kids, big problems. Woo. And also my mom and dad can't fix everything. And so realizing that, and realizing that I had to lean on others, and also to lean on God, it was important for me, for my kids to know God is there to be with you when things are hard. And it doesn't mean things aren't going to be hard. They're almost guaranteed to be hard. But to be able to rely on other adults and other people in your life, and to lean on God, I wanted them to learn that. And so church helped. I tried doing it myself, like, oh, I'll just have my own spiritual practice. And I've learned that's not enough, that the community is important as well, and so I want my children to be exposed to that as well. That's great. Thanks.
So, I mean, at the risk of sort of stating the obvious, in large part because we believe it's true, so there's that. And also because, so I'm in the military, and we've moved around a lot as a consequence. Service and community are important to us, and so one of the questions is, you know, how do you maintain some sense of community as you're moving? And part of the answer for us is to maintain the connectedness through the body of Christ and through the church community. You know, wherever you go in the Episcopal Church, the lectionary will be the same today. We're going to be talking about the same things, and that's important to us. And sort of instilling that in Theodore as he grows up, that you have this connectedness available to you, and there are other people who do not share your exact experience, who share this with you all over the world, is very important to us.
Yeah, I think for me too, you know, growing up, going to church every Sunday, you know, one of the things, I did not grow up in the Episcopal Church, so that was new to me in college. But I did grow up going to church every Sunday, and one of the things that certainly when I was pregnant with Theo and trying to figure out like what is that going to look like in this era, right, the COVID era, but also, you know, in raising a child, you know, it's not the same traditions I had growing up, and in some ways I like them better. I wouldn't be part of the Episcopal Church. But for me, it's, you know, the thing that is shared between those two experiences for me is that I believe in worshiping God. And while you can worship God in a lot of ways, that's true, church is the historic one. Going to church or spending time with your church community was how you worshiped God. It was how everyone came together and learned about these things together, and grew together as a community, and showed God a corporate sense of
of our love. And I think, of course, you can do that in a variety of ways, but this is kind of this is the written way that has been for 2,000 plus years. And if it's worked that long, if it's worked that long, then all right. You know, like, and I think that's important to instill in children that, you know, churches may not be popular in 2025, but that doesn't mean it's not important. And frankly, its lack of popularity probably hints at some of its importance. Things that tend to be popular in a young culture are things that come and go. The things that endure are the things that are not always popular.
Great. Keaton, what about you? What makes it a cornerstone for your family being here at church?
Yeah, so I think they hit on a lot of the core, you know, foundational things. I mean, I think there's the two lenses I look from, like me as a one wife, like human, and then certainly as the mom lens. And so it's a huge importance, and like, you know, everybody mentioned, like we can worship and we can, you know, follow God and do in a lot of different facets. As a family now, it's like the kids are in the forefront of all of our thinking, thoughts, our day to day. And so for them to truly have the foundation, because like Nicole mentioned, life is really hard. There's a lot of loss, can be a lot of loneliness, like there's just a lot of like tough stuff. And so if you don't have that genuine foundation of knowing that no matter what you're walking through, you're never alone. Sorry, it makes me emotional.
Yeah.
Because as we know, like there's some friends we met here that's like similar journeys of really, really tough losses that when our God's on our side, we're never alone in any of it. And at the end of the day, it's like whether you're in Northern Virginia, South Texas, Ohio, the culture is going to be there. Like there's sports, there's like what job you have, but none of that really matters, right? When our day time comes, it's like what's the Lord and our Father's waiting with open arms. So it's really important for us to then, like for the kids especially, to know that no matter where they go, you know, how old, that they have that. And so, and then as then a parent, the community that you surround yourself with, we always call it like who's on our bus. And so it is the most important thing, especially like as you get even younger than we do. That is who they are around, the teachers that they have, the kids that they surround themselves with, the families that they're then play with. That's everything. Because the reality of like we as parents, and I'm sure as you guys can testify, is that it's really just a fraction of their time. And so it's that the bigger piece that's really that ultimately matters. So knowing that wherever we may land, where we moved quite a bit too, is that when you find that church home, you have a built-in where it's like, okay, maybe at home, maybe it's a disaster, but on Sundays we all come together and we have this one great unifying reason why we're all here, and we're gonna go with that.
Yeah, that's an amazing way to end, I think. Yeah, that's really incredible. Thank you guys so much. I think that it's me, so I wasn't sure if we wanted to open it up to the crowd at all, but yeah.
But if you have anything to offer, or questions, or comments, we welcome them.
I would just say, setting your kids at Shrine on Camp. Talk about locking your kids in.
Yeah.
I have a 13-year-old and a 9-year-old, and my boy in particular is 9. We sent him when he was 7, and I thought when he was 8, so he's gonna hate it. I'm gonna get in trouble when I go pick him up. He loves the Shrine, and he's the sportiest kid you've ever met, and he loves it. So that's just my one thing. If you've got kids, you want them to do sleepaway camp, Shrine is incredible, and it has made getting them to come to church afterwards way easy.
Yeah, we didn't
I
talk
love
much
that.
about Shine On, but
Yeah.
I was like,
Me too, me too.
we're not like go to retreat sort of people. And my husband, you'll never go to Shine On.
But you're talking about two different
Two different
things.
things.
Retreats
And so
and the
there's
camp,
the
yeah.
retreats and the camp, and so we did the retreat, and we were like, this is awesome. Like, because it just, like, the connection, it's so real, like, and Caroline was like, we are always sorry, no matter what. Yeah.
But my kids, they like the retreats too, both. They
Yeah,
just
and
love, they
so
love
we didn't
it.
talk about that, but I highly recommend Shrine On, and I'm a person who's like, we don't do that kind of thing. So glad we did.
Now I gotta leave.
Okay.
Well, thank you all so much.
Thank you,
Just one note of hope there. I mean, our middle daughter, and you know, she was very involved with travel sports, lacrosse, all over the U.S. And she never could make youth group. And I'm like, you can never go to youth group. And it was a sorrow for us, for me, that she could never go be with youth at church. And now what does she do? She's youth minister at the Cathedral. So don't give up hope. You know.